It's been so long since I had to do an intro, y'all. I don't even know what to start. Okay, so this person I am talking to today, I'm gonna tell y'all a quick story time. Now, when you meet me in person, I am awkward. Okay, I am a quiet, especially at a conference. Oh no, I'd rather be in somebody's corner or room minding my business. And of course, I knew of this person before this conference, but it was this particular year, which I can't remember what year it was now, like 3, 4 years ago, maybe. And we were at the advancement for higher education, for the study of higher education conference. And my friends are real famous, like meaning we can't walk from one hallway to the next without being stopped 10 times. And so and at this particular day, we had this whole pact that like you not stopping, nobody's talking to nobody, we not inviting nobody to our group. It's just gonna be us close knit people, and we're gonna enjoy this conference. Well, then there was another person who was still hanging around. And at first I was like, what's happening? What's going on? I thought we said no new friends. And then she kept hanging around and I was like, I think I like her because she quiet, but she like comes in at the right time. It's a natural flow. And I just admire somebody who's like, no, I'm coming to get everything that I want. I want to be a part of this group. I'm gonna be a part of this group. Y'all ain't gonna say no. And like since then, I'm just like, yeah, naturally fits in, and we've gotten to know each other. And a brilliant y'all, a brilliant scholar. And she came into the Finish Your Dissertation program, rocked that, built community there,
Thank
and
you.
finish, and so like so much glory. And just out here being a whole doctor, leading whole research programs and whatnot. And I love it. So welcome to the show, Dr.
A
Willis.
whole doctor. Come
A
on.
whole doctor. Yeah. So tell me, like, why does a little girl from the backwoods of Georgia, what are you doing at a place like first the University of Georgia and then University of Pennsylvania, right? Or is it Penn State? University of Penn.
University of Pittsburgh.
Okay, Pittsburgh. I will edit that out. I will edit it out. Don't worry. Okay, so what does a little girl from the backwoods of Georgia, University of Georgia, University of Pittsburgh, being a whole doctor, now in Texas, how that happen?
So I'm even go before then. I'm even go. I'm gonna back up a little bit more before then. So graduated from undergrad from Georgia College, where we originally met, from Georgia College State
Oh
University.
my God. You
Hey,
see how you see how I blocked that out of
Mark
my mind?
University.
You see how I blocked that out? I was like, I was never at Georgia College, okay, because it was not the experience. Okay, I'm sorry. I blocked it out. I did.
But yes, so I graduated from there where I met the Dr. Marvette Lacy. And then I was like, you know what? Let me experience the city life real quick. And so I was like, okay, I actually, that was my first time applying to joint master's and PhD programs then, but I wasn't really hearing back from the people. So I was like, maybe God is leading me in a different direction. And sure enough, my best friend, Z Crawford, Zacharias Crawford, he sent me an opportunity in Newark, New Jersey for AmeriCorps. And so I put in an application for them, heard back from them. That was the first acceptance I got. So I was like, and it was a year of service. So I was like, I can do a year in Newark, New Jersey. So I took my happy home self, my happy country black girl self to Newark, New Jersey. And then I did a year of service in AmeriCorps. And then I was seeing, like, when I worked in that school, when I worked in the school did my service year and was working in the school, I was seeing a lot of the same things that were happening in my hometown within my own schooling experiences. And I was like, wait a minute. People oftentimes try to pit these rural versus urban versus suburban conversation, really the rural versus urban. And I was like, wait, but it's so many similarities. While yes, there are nuances, it's similarities too, right? So let's talk about it. And so then I decided after my year of service, let me go ahead and go to Teachers College at Columbia University. So got accepted to Teachers College at Columbia University. Then I met the wonderful Dr. Ty McNamee, who let me know, are you our rural? Because all my life growing up, I'm like, I'm just a country black girl. What is rural? That's a political term. I don't know nothing about no rural. Um, so then I went to Teachers College at Columbia University. Then from there, I applied to my doctoral programs all places, everywhere. I should have been geographically bound too, now looking back on it. And that is okay. Sometimes we're called to different places that God calls us in different seasons. And I got into, and I knew that UGA had chosen me, but I also had chosen UGA. Number one, because of Dr. Rashonda Breeden. She was sending me all the apartment listings, like, hey, sis, hey, like consider this, And so I knew then, like from one Black woman to the next, that UGA had chosen me just as much as I had chosen them. And then my chair, Dr. Darius Means, he came and did a talk at Teachers College at Columbia University. So after we had that conversation, when he came there to do the talk for the rural group at the time, it just made sense. And also why I chose UGA is because they didn't see me as being pigeonholed to a number in terms of, oh, you got to make this on the what's the test called? GRE, the GRE, yeah, the GRE, and this, that, and the third. And so he was the first person they planted a seed in me, because other institutions was like, oh, we can accept you, but you got to retake the GRE, da, 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 da. And I was like, listen, standardized tests are not for me, and I'm not for them, and I'm okay with that. And so and so that's why I was like, I'm super excited. And then not only that, Dr. Breeden also got me the position. Like I rolled into her position. Like she was my predecessor. It's like, and it was just like, it was really God ordained. Like it was meant for me to be there. And then let's talk about how I got to Pittsburgh. Me and God had this conversation, Marvette. I was like, I'm gonna give it a year, like I had to really think about it. Because I was like, oh, I'm leaving the South to go back to the East Coast, or what I consider the North kind of vibes. And I was like, and then to the snow, me and snow, just that ain't really my thing, Like I like the beach, I like warm weather. I can get the vibes of that. But snow, you telling me I gotta go back to the snow? I just left New York, and you telling me I gotta go back. And so, but like when you talk about how much you talk about possibility model, like my chair is the epitome of possibility model. And so I knew that he had my back. And from there, I just knew God had it already in his plan, right, for me. And so I took my happy-go-lucky self, and I went to University of Pittsburgh. And of course, because my chair is a huge part of my community, and even still today is really a huge part of my community. And even today is the reason why I got the awards that I have gotten. Because me, I'm like still my rule idea. I'm like, should I submit? But he gave me that push to be like, Jenay, lean into your brilliance, know who you are, right? And so he continues to do that still today. So with him being a huge part of my community, I was like, it makes sense. And then I kept praying on it. And then God just kept on sending me the signs like, you should go to the University of Pittsburgh, because he has been a huge part of your community. He continues to pour into you. And so it just made sense. And so that's how.
Because, right, like saying, especially like even just from a research perspective, it just makes sense to just follow him.
Right.
Oh, there's so many things I could talk about here. But I'm gonna go to mentorship first, because, right, like the saying about it takes a village does not end when you turn 18. Like that continues, because behind every doc student, especially, is a sea of folks, especially Black women, who stayed on the phone late night, send voice messages, reading over emails, reading over documents, like trying to plan of like what you're gonna do, what you're gonna say, what you're gonna look like, what you're gonna dress, like all of that. And so Dr. Breeden being such a core part of this journey for you.
Even when you say that piece about, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go.
You say that piece about how to dress. I remember being at the UGA, like before they admit you, it's the day. What is it called?
Like the interview day?
Yeah, the interview day. So I stayed with Dr. Breeden for interview day, and I was kind of like asking her like how my fit look, you like fit check, like kind of like, and she was giving me like feedback, and I appreciate that, because she didn't let me walk out of the house looking any kind of way. And so even that is a part of mentorship. Like she saw me clearly, and I appreciate her seeing me clearly from day one. Like even prior to come to UGA, but even when I got there for visit day, that's what it's called, visit day.
Visit day, yes.
When I got there for visit day, and then like it just me and her, like she's my big sister, and like I'm so grateful. I know how to tell her 1,000 times, but I'm super grateful for her for always seeing me clearly. And also we got a shout out to the Nayas of the world, the Cones of the world, because them too. And I think that's a part, like when you made me think about my journey in terms of my doc journey, I think that's why a large part of me was like, do I want to leave UGA? Because My people
Mm,
are here at UGA. My people, like my tribe is here, right? And so, like Dr. Babette's, we all doctors now. Shout out to us. And so they like even still today we kiki and I talk my shit, with them. And
yeah.
so, but I think having gone from UGA where I'm like embraced by Black women, right? And I have this beautiful affinity to Black women. And then I'm going to Pitt where I'm the only Black woman in my program, right? And so I think that kind of like shook me up a little bit in terms of that transition. But I also was still connected to Babette. So it was really not, it didn't feel, no, I didn't really feel a huge disconnection. And then I also met some beautiful people that I call my Pitt fam who are also Black, and then also have an indigenous friend as well who I was connected to who were outside of my program. So just being able to build community wherever I was also a beautiful thing as well.
Mm. And so what about when, because a lot of folks will like message me or whatever, and they'll say, well, I have a great relationship with my chair. I feel connected to my cohorts. I don't really need your services, but I appreciate like listening to you. And I'm like, that is fascinating. So as someone who had like y'all the best, I just made a note to like stalk him to get him on this podcast because when I tell you like when I speak of, I know examples of faculty who have balance, like have a whole life outside of their work, but you will not be able to outwork him at the same time. Like just the kindest, the like most generous person, but boundary game on lock. Like we need to talk to him. And you have the chair, plus you have a supportive community and from different areas of your life supporting you, like why would you sign up for a dissertation coaching program?
Yes. So, of course, so like you said, I have all the amazing people in my life, all the amazing resources, access to all the amazing
Mhm.
resources. But let's take a trip down memory lane, Dr. Lacey. So, when I first joined, well, when I remember when you and I had our first Zoom call, by the way, I
Mhm.
was like,
I do too.
I feel like my life was in shambles. And so I say that I say that because like this was the height of the pandemic. I'm being asked, do I want to transfer program? So there's a lot of unsteady stuff happening in my life, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm like, and then navigating a relationship with a narcissist, had to get myself up out of there. And looking back and thanking God for where He brought me from, right? And so also at the same time, I was just finding out that my father is diagnosed with dementia, right?
Mhm.
And so all of these things are happening in my life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I don't have any steady or stability right now. Right. And so I feel like when we had our first conversation, it just like you fed my spirit and it just like felt like home for me. And
Mhm.
that's what I needed. Right. And so I feel like that's a huge part of why I joined the program. Cause like you said, I had the support and everything. But at that moment in my life where I feel like in my own world, sometimes I didn't have that sense of stability, right? And so I feel like FYD and my FYD fam was a huge part of that constant that I had when my outside world or my internal world was like kind of shattered in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And so just being reminded that we might go through things as people or even as Black people specifically, but just knowing that, and I think about the question that you asked about a hurdle. I don't think anything I've experienced, not necessarily a hurdle, but I would call it a faith move. So in all of those things that I just named in terms of like what I was going through in that season, it was really a faith move. Like me going to Pittsburgh was a faith move, not necessarily a hurdle, but a faith move because I know that my chair had my back because he had my back from day one when I even applied to the program and not being pigeonholed to a GRE score, right? And so just being reminded of all these people and resources in my community allows me to be reminded like, yeah, I can be a part of this community. Shout out to you. And also shout out to Dr. Academics. We are doctors now too.
All
And
doctors, yes.
in row. Yes, shout
Mhm.
out to us. And so just being reminded that even when instability might happen in my life, I can have a constant. And for me, FYD was the constant for me. Like showing up to, I would like I said, our first conversation, you fed my spirit. And then when I joined the FYD fam and then we had our first Zoom call as a collective, that fed my spirit too. So that made me like, let me come back for more. And it held me accountable as well, because like I'm navigating all these things. Height of the pandemic, let's name the pandemic still going on. And
Listen.
so, and so all of that was happening. And so just having FYD as a point of accountability, but also as a way to feed my spirit, kind of thing, when I feel like in some ways my own life was unstable.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I can imagine, right? Like, you talk about transitioning to Pittsburgh, right? Like you already had a community at Georgia. You already was making progress. Like, I believe it was if you stayed at Georgia, you were going to take your exams, or did you take your exams and then go? Like, I remember we had a lot of conversations about your exam and preparing for that. And that's a critical point, like where a lot of people just would have been like, no, I'm just gonna stay here, chair, no chair. I don't wanna like whatever, all the things that could come up about like, do I have to start over? I know you didn't, but like do I have to start over, but I do think there was some other things you had to do for their program. And
It's
so
around
how,
coursework.
yeah, like how did you yeah, what did you tell yourself to not get lost in the pride of it all, I guess?
So I think like when I recognized, I was like, oh dang, like so you telling me that'll add an additional year to like if I leave UGA, that'll add an additional year to coursework because some of the courses didn't transfer. And so I just had to have a conversation with me and God, and then also with my family. And they were super nervous about like, why are you going to Pittsburgh? And so again, being family oriented, like how sometimes like in the Black family, like Black women especially carry a huge toll, not a toll, I wouldn't say it a toll, but a huge, like the maternal
Oh, like
instincts
the
and all the
yeah.
things, everything. So I was and still today, I'm a huge part of that in terms of showing up for my family. And I think about like really understanding, like, okay, I'm going to do an additional year of coursework, but I'm okay with that. And why am I okay with that? And then let's go back to Rashonda Breeden, because she was like, listen, you need to make a list. You need to make a list of your pros and your cons of this transferring programs. And so I made a pros and cons list of that. And that really, really helped me. That really helped me understand, like, I know that because I have a Darius Means and I have Dr. Bobette's, that I'm going to be okay, right? I can do this food. And I also have FYD to hold me accountable to this. I'm
Mhm.
not alone. Like I think I posted this. I only post like that now, but I think I posted this on social media about like you can go to places and you can go afraid, you can go scared, whatever it be, but know that you're never alone. Know
Mhm.
that you are never alone. And so I remind myself of that because it really was a faith move. And so again, being able to build that community, but also knowing that I have my community who I'm even still connected to today. I still talk my shit with them and everything. And so just being and I can show up as me. I think that's one of the reasons I was like, because I even remember being on the phone with my chair
Mhm.
about it. And I'll just start crying because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna leave Bobette's. And I'm like, and just bawling, and my chair, he gonna keep a straight face, like he gonna give you the space to do what you
Yeah.
need to do. But then we gonna have this conversation, right? And so and so like, and I just remember thinking about that, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna leave the Bobette's. And so, but again, like being a part of FYD, having Ratchetdemics and then having Bobette's reminded me that it's okay. It's okay to move. It's okay to make moves because remember, home lives within your heart and you can always be connected to people. And then my thought partner, Karina May, she always reminds me too, Jenay, she's like, Jenay, you got to be reminded, like, people are connected to people all over the world. So yes, they might not be right there with you, but you have access to these people anywhere and everywhere regardless of where you may be geographically. So I
Yeah.
think that's continue to drive me.
So like take me like you move, let's say like the middle, maybe the middle towards the end of the first semester you're there, because that's if like reality is there, like the hype of making the transition, you're settled. What was that like being 3, 4 months into this transition?
When I first got to Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
So because of the height of the pandemic, so that first what was it? I think the first semester, no, first year I was online. So I was
Okay.
like, but let's go. Let's travel to Pittsburgh. So that I can look back and laugh on it now because I'm reminded of where God brought me from, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like experiencing a lot of homesickness. I was experiencing a lot of like, oh my gosh, like jokingly, oh, am I having an identity crisis? But not really having an identity crisis. But like because I had left my community, right? Like, yes, you can like build community wherever you go, but it's like, where do I start when I was already connected and embedded
Right.
in the community where I was, right? And so I think what I was experiencing, and then the snow got me like, I don't know, they don't shovel like it was so
No,
ghetto, Marvette.
it's
And
gonna
so
melt. It's gonna melt.
and so like I was feeling like so many, and I remember like even talking to one of the students in the program before I got there, which I didn't understand, but one of the students who was in my cohort, and don't get me wrong, I did ask the article to be sent to me, but I'll never forget. They sent me an article that said Pittsburgh is one of the like most dangerous places for Black women. And I'm like, are you trying to get me there? Are you trying to not get me? And so I had to I even had to put that, I had to compartmentalize that to really focus in on the hugest part of my community being number one, God, and then my chair. And so when I went there with that end goal in mind, knowing that my chair is the biggest part, one of the biggest parts, if not the biggest part of my community, I went with that end goal in mind. And I remember talking to my therapist, Marvette,
Mhm.
and I was telling her, I was like, I'm coming here for a year. She was like, you already know you're gonna be here for a year. So, do what you gotta do and handle business. And so with me going there with that end goal in mind,
Mhm.
regardless of experiencing, like, yes, I had some seasonal depression that I was experiencing. I was also experiencing homesickness. And then also just really had to sit with myself. And so I had to bring home to me, like I was cooking soul food, quite a bit, kind of thing. And so I just
Mhm.
really had to sit with myself. And then it wasn't until like that spring semester that I really got to like kick it with my people, my pit fam, like Chelsea,
Mhm.
Bree, Chris, Cheddar, all of them. And then my Black Educational Thought fam too. They also played a huge part in me being at Pitt, like in me feeling like home at Pitt. And so I
Mhm.
think that when I look back on that moment, I'm reminded of my resilience in that moment because it was some really, really depressing times. And so I say that to say like God and therapy coexisting really got me through those days.
Therapy and coexistence. Listen, did you ever like feel with such an accomplished chair? Did you ever feel and like thinking about who your mentors are? Like, do you ever feel pressure to like, oh, I had to perform in a certain way, or I have to like my work has to be at a certain standard? Like, did you ever have any of those pressures?
Once in looking back on, I don't think I did because I remember received this article speaking back to UGA, stay on your own mat.
Mm,
Got an article about staying on your own mat. And so because my mentors received me so well in who I was and who I am today, I was reminded to stay on my own. I don't even remember the author of the
mm,
article at UGA, but I was reminded to stay on my own mat. And like I continue to say, what's going to be for me is going to be for me and it won't miss me. So I think staying true to that. And like we use the term heavy hitters. I love being around the heavy hitters because that pushes me to go hard, and also it pushes me to continue to lean into my brilliance, as my chair continuously says
yeah.
as well. So
Yeah, that reminds me. This is so random, but this is how my mind works. I remember this was right around the time that I switched to Chris as my chair, and we somehow happened to go to the same gym. I mean, it's Athens. It's only like two gyms, okay? So you're gonna run into somebody. And I remember watching her work out. I remember stopping in the middle of the floor, being like, "Girl, it was 2 minutes. You did like five exercises, and you did like 20 reps each, and how do you have the energy?" But that was a like a physical visual representation of how she shows up as a researcher and as a teacher. But I don't know, it was something about her working out that made all of that click for me. And I didn't feel pressured. I felt more like, oh, let's get it. Like, let's go. Because if that's the energy we bring into this, let's do this. And it was one of those moments of like, yep, I made the right decision of sticking with her. Like we are going, it's like we're going all the way. So yeah, I said that to say I agree of I'm inspired. I don't feel pressure because they're in their like you said, they're on their own mat, they're in their own lane. I don't have to, right? I don't need to do what she's doing. I don't need to be this person who's like super duper known for like sexual violence based research and bringing a power conscious framework to it. I could be over here in my own lane helping Black women in their identity development, but it's because of her and because her and your chair like great friends. It is
They
because
are
of
great
their
friends.
yeah, it's like they have this shared philosophy of students get to be their own researchers. They don't have to do what we do. And but their projects are so cool that you're like, so if I could just be on the team, it would be great. Thanks.
Yeah. And too, I know that the both of our chairs are like, your win is my win is your win. And so I really did learn that from my chair, in many, many ways, like, and also from my Babettes as well. I learned that yes, like we all out here trying to win. And I appreciate, and I learned what I specifically learned from the Babettes is that when we see an opportunity, let's send it to all of us. Because if one of us get it, that's a win for all of us.
Yeah.
We're not, and I appreciate that because I remember even coming to the on visit day, and I remember it was me and Cone were the Black women, and I didn't see Cone as a threat. I didn't see her as like, this is my
Yeah.
competition. I see this person as my sister, right? And so I was praying that both of us would get in, and sure enough, we did. And so I just really am reminded of like, let's share the resources with everyone, and whoever wins, it's a win for all of us. It's a collective win. Like when I think about the awards that I've received, it's a collective win for me and my chair, as well as my community, right? Because this work is bigger than myself. And so being reminded that it's not, oh, this is individually for me pushing me forward. No, this is to push me and my people for it, my community for it. I'm very much a community oriented person, and that's who I've always been, coming from a rural Black community. We're big on that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so good. So good. So this is how did y'all come up with the name Bobettes? Is it Bobettes? Like BA or Bob? Yeah, how did y'all come up with
Bobbett. So it's so funny. So Rose mom has a friend named Mrs. Babette or Miss Babette. And so the name of our chat is actually called Babette. Like if we need
Mhm.
something, we just drop it in the chat. And I'm the voice noter of the
Yeah.
group. So I'm quick to drop a voice note in there.
Me
And so
too. I don't get this typing thing. I'm like, just say the message.
And so she in row one day she was and it's so accessible, right? I love a voice note. And so we were just having a conversation in the chat one day, and I think Ro was bringing up Miss Barbette. And so then I think from there we just kind of changed the name of the group. I think Naya renamed it to Call Barbette, and I'm the one who spelled it out. I said it's spelled Bobbette, ain't it? And she was like, yeah, it is. And we kind of all started laughing. And as soon as I defended, we changed it to doctor called Dr. Bobette. Or yeah.
I love that. And the three of you. I can't imagine. That's so much gold in that chat.
And with Cone, we can't forget Cone. Cone's in the group too. Yeah.
Okay, so then it's
The four of
definitely
us. It's the four.
definitely
Yeah.
gold in this chat, and that needs to be its own study probably. Talk to me about your thought process as you was preparing to start your proposal.
So again, I'm real like big on my face. So I was having a conversation with God about like really going back home, and I feel like I was already being called back home because I'm a person like, yeah, I'm gonna get what I need from these institutions, but I'm not gonna keep it to myself. I'm gonna take it to my people who would benefit from these resources, right? And so I remember, I think, yeah, we were in the conversation together on
Yeah.
FYD because
Mm-hmm.
y'all was helping me craft the email to send to the principal, and I thank y'all for that. And so I was like, how can I, make sure? And then I think what happened was like how I thought about my proposal is like, let me see if I can get to the high school first, right? Let me see if I can get into the high school, right? And so a lot of it is because of my pre-existing relationship with my principal. And then also my principal's relationships with my siblings. I have two older siblings who also graduated from the same high school. All names start with J. Black folks,
Mm-hmm.
Jordan, Jared, Jenay. But and so I think that once I had gotten the yes on that, but I think what happened too, I had to pray on too, was there was a shift in leadership at the high school. And so I get to that when we get to the writing part of the data collection stage.
Mm-hmm.
But the proposal piece was just something I kept praying on. And I would, in Pittsburgh, there was this place, speaking of like how I would like kind of like, I'm a nature girl, I love nature. So I would often walk around this reservoir that's in Pittsburgh that was at Morningside Park, not too far from where I live.
Uh,
So I would just kind of walk around there sometimes, and just thoughts would kind of come to me. And then Ro always was good at reminding me to journal. So she's one of the reasons why I started journal for it. Like I had journaled before, like I
Mhm.
used to do poetry a lot, but I think I would tap back into it in my doctoral program. And so I think what I'm reminded of constantly is that like that proposal piece came a lot from like feeling like I was being called back home, right? And so being able to reach when y'all who helped me craft the email to my principal, getting that yes from him kind of affirmed and reaffirmed that I was being called back home. And so from there, I remember meeting with my chair, and we met at a restaurant like near the university. And he was like, okay, now let's talk about, he get the business. Like
Yeah.
we
Yep.
can kiki and stuff, but we're gonna get to business. And so I remember him, I was actually thinking about this week in terms of like how he wants me to submit my proposals to him. He was like, okay, I'm gonna ask you to start with the literature review because that's the meat of it. And so I started with the literature review, and I would get feedback from my chair. And he's like, add this, Jenay, add. And I'm like, dang, how much you want me to add? Not saying that to him, but jokingly in my head.
Yeah.
And so, I'm reminded like I needed that to make it meatier, right?
Yeah.
And so from that, it was kind of beautiful to kind of write the introduction,
Mhm.
because I went from the literature review to the introduction, and then because it's the first three parts, it's the literature review, then the introduction. What's the third?
The
What's the third?
methods.
Yeah, the methods, and then so no, I did literature review, methods, and then went to the introduction because he knew the introduction wasn't going to
Right.
take. And so I think like having his guidance is a huge part of what helped me in the proposal. And I know we talked about supportive chairs, but it's really because of theirs that I really, really was able to be successful in that proposal stage.
Mm, yeah. And that reminds me because I lately I've been trying to be more vocal with people of like I'm like I love y'all so much. I don't care about your dissertation. I get it. This whole program is called Finish Your Dissertation, whatnot, and that's what I talk about. But I care about that because that's what you care about right now. Like I want to just work with you more than I want to talk about your dissertation. And I'm bringing that up here, right? Because your chair is very, while we have like, workbooks and whatnot, videos in the program, it is really the chair's expectations that you're writing towards, right? So I can help you get started, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the chair that says, like, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, change this, remove this. And I see that my job in the program is to help translate what the chair is saying and translate that into a step by step, like to do list of this is how you get it done. That's where I would say for me, my superpower is because, especially when you have an amazing chair like Dr. Means, like he's going to guide you. He understands qualitative research, and especially when you're doing a PAR project, like he's going
Mhm.
to guide you. And I want to make a note about that in a minute about type of research. But yeah, I like utilizing us for community, right? Utilizing us to say like, how do I craft this email? Utilizing us to be like, I don't know. He keep telling me to do things and like to hype you up. You need that, and I don't think I like feel really bad for folks who don't know what that's like to have that type of in between support while they're working on their dissertation and in between.
But I just read this book. I'm glad you said that because that made me think
Uh,
about something. I just read this book. What's the name of it? I don't even know. It's in my book bag. But but I just read this book, and I actually went to a Black women's book club like they have here. It's called the Breathing Room at TCU. And
Mhm.
space for Black women.
Mm.
So the book, we had a conversation about this book, and it really talks about strategies and tips and stuff. And one of the key takeaways that I had from the book is you need a board of directors. You
Mm.
need a board of directors because, like my chair always reminds me, like you have me, but you also have committee members. So I kind of translate the committee members to kind of my board of directors, and even my friends, like they're in some ways my board of directors in terms of like how we mentor each other and show
Yeah.
up for one another. And so you can't just have one individual as your end all be all. You have to have several people to support you in the process. And so I think about how instrumental my chair was. And I also think about how instrumental I'm thankful for the President Kenlocks. I'm thankful for the Dr. McCamleys. I'm thankful for the Dr. Waynes as well, because that really, and I got to put some respect on her name because she is now President Kenlock.
Ooh.
And so And so just being reminded like how really important it is to have these board of directors that kind of support you, because they have their areas of expertise, and their areas of expertise vary. So what one person's expertise might not be the next person's expertise. And I think about it too in terms of how committees come together. Like, say for instance, I already have my rule expert. I don't need another rule expert in my opinion. Let me use I statements. In my opinion, I don't need another rule expert because I have the rule expert, right? And so really thinking about, and then also knowing that I had two rule experts on my committee, but they look at it from different lenses, right? And they have different positionalities, if you will. But I think it's still important in terms of how are they coming to the work. It's through different lenses and through different worldviews. And so how am I leaning on my board of directors to kind of help me be guided throughout this process? And they're providing me with the autonomy. And I think I've heard stories, horror stories of like, oh, my chair's trying to make me do this and this, and I can't even get my own research done because they want me to do their, and it's just not,
Mhm.
I think that's some people's downfall. I'm not going to put them in a box, but I think that's some people's downfall in the process. I'm just blessed to have had a chair that really gave me the autonomy to really do what I wanted to do in terms of my proposal, in terms of my research, and really guiding that.
Listen, okay, this is the only time I get into my elitist bag. I tell people like, well, I went to the University of Georgia. I tried my best not to be one of the people who like the University of Georgia. You know how the folks be. And I do get this way, but it's usually around qualitative research. And it's because I will fight anybody in the streets. Like we have one of the top, if not the top, like qual programs. Like we have an
Agree.
entire department, right, that teaches qualitative research. And so, yeah, when you have someone who's doing the work, who is known for it, like the rest of the committee just becomes about like, who do I want to talk to? Like, who do I want to work with? Like, who's gonna? What else can you do for me? Can you give us a little bit of an overview of your dissertation work, like, yeah, the design and all of the nerdy details?
Yes, I miss, oh my gosh, every time I talk to this, I'm, oh my gosh, I miss my students. And I reach out to them sometimes, but teenagers, I don't know, sometimes they're not the best at responding. Um, they love the social media, so I love my students. They say I love my students. And so the design of and I chose youth participatory action research because I know I wanted to go back to my high school, right? And so I also think about what one of my committee members, Dr. McCamley, said. She was like, reading your method session, it was teaching me about YPAR.
Come on,
It was teaching
teach
me.
you.
And
Yes.
so back to the possibility model, because I have a Darius means, he like working with him with PAR, like kind of was instrumental in me crafting that methodology chapter. And so that kind of helped me with the design of the project. I think with me could really like fleshing it out is like, what questions do I want to ask? What do I want to gain from this study? And then I think I didn't even know you could use two frameworks, right? I'm thinking like, oh, I can only use one framework, but it's not getting at the critical and the asset because I need to get at the both. And because these systems that permeate society, we got to talk about it. And at the same time, these assets that we have as rural Black folk and rural Black communities, those have to be talked about as well, right? And so really understanding like, how is it that I want to approach this work, right? And then really crafting like, okay, let's think about, let's get into the language of it. So let's do focus group studies, but then also being mindful of how I'm approaching this work with when I go into the classroom, right? Or go into the school itself. And so when I crafted and when I was writing it all out, I was really like, I'm a very visual person. I'm sure you know this.
Mhm.
And I'm a very organized person. And so I was really like writing down like in phases, like this is how I want it to look. This is the manifestation of how I see this
Mhm.
project. And so really being genuine in my approach, right? And talking about non-extractive practices, truly making sure that I'm showing up to this, knowing that seeing myself in the work as well, right? Because I'm a rural Black student, right? And so I think mine is a little different because it truly, for me, I see it as hard work because there's this connection to my people back home. I'm connected to my hometown community. I'm connected to the school. And then just being reminded of like but the students didn't know me at all, right? And so what does my recruitment process look like? And so that's where I had to pull in the new leadership from the high school and be like, hey, like this is how I want to get the students involved. And so they kind of helped me with that piece, right? And so then from there, really knowing like now that I have crafted this, how am I going to enter this space? And my chair was really good at reminding me, like, Jenay, you hold a lot of power in this space, right? And so being able to, and then, with YPAR really being a shared power approach, me continuously disrupting these power dynamics. So really being reminded that, yes, like, I'm a knowledge holder in this space, but equally important, or even more important, is that my students are the knowledge holders and the experts of their own lived experiences in this space, right? And so pretty much whatever they say goes
Yeah.
within, right? And so I think that was super important in terms of creating, I don't really like the terminology safe space, but I do like the saying, like, creating safeness or
Mhm.
safety in the space, and very spiritual as well, because each of my students in a lot of ways were affiliated with faith, um,
Yeah.
and would talk about God a lot throughout our conversation. And so we had that mutual connection, right? And organic connection, if you will. And so really think, oh my gosh, I miss my students so much. And so really thinking about that, and how is it that I'm entering this space? How is it that I'm being reminded that? And then, of course, shout out to my thought partners during my dissertation process, Dr. Rashonda Breeden, and then soon to be Dr. Karina May.
Mm.
And so really thinking about how I'm kind of conversing with them about, like, how is it that I'm entering this space? How is it that I'm showing up in this space? And so, like, we think about, like, the time of things, how they were going on. And so my students, I was like, when is the last time y'all talked about, like, relevant events that are happening and then bringing that to the space? They were like, Miss Jenay, we haven't really talked about that since, like, what, middle school. And so I made that space. I made sure to bring conversations, relevant happenings that were happening, especially in particular to the Black community, to
Mhm.
that space, so that we can digest it and stuff. And because it's really important, right? And so really understanding how I'm creating a space for them to share, but also creating them a space to really feel safe with me, and among me, to really share that. And I remember, like, we just would just, like, joke a lot, even when it was hard conversation we have, because as Black folk, we joke about anything. And so
Yes.
like, that was even beautiful to be able to have moments of laughter through even the hard and difficult conversations.
Mm. So a lot of people, this podcast in many ways is their qualitative research education, because a lot of programs mostly they'll do like a general like intro to qual research, but that's about it. Maybe you get a class about how to collect data, but that's primarily focused on doing a few interviews, calling it a day. So you did participatory action research, youth participatory action research. How would you describe that methodology?
That's a good question. I think it's a loaded question too. How would I describe that? How would I describe youth participatory action research? I think that beyond the academic language, I would truly describe it as hard work. I would truly describe it as community-driven work. I would truly describe it as, let's really be intentional. And to what does intentionality look like within this space, right? And so also reminded that this is a student-driven space. I'm the adult researcher, but the students are driving the work. This is their lived experiences, right? And so being reminded that I take up space in this space that we're sharing right now, but this is y'all's knowledge that's going into this dissertation. This is y'all's lived experiences that is shaping your own access to higher education. And so truly being intentional. And I want to go back to what you said earlier about, like, how did I, like, write it up? Because I think even the way I wrote up the phases was intentional too, in terms of the intentionality. So I had 4 phases within my work. I had the first phase was really to get at, like, this is an introduction to youth participatory action research. So this is the first time that I'm bringing youth participatory action research to my school district. So in a way, making history, not in a way, but your girl made history. So and so and so the first one really, okay, like, so Ms. Jenay, what is it that we're going to be doing with this work, right? And then the second one is to really understand, okay, we're using a method known as photo voice, which really, really is, as it said, it gives voice to the photos, but it also uses what is called the showed method, like what is seen here, what is happening here, how does this impact our lives, and so on and so forth, right? And so really letting them be the drivers of that, right? In terms of, like, how are these how are these happenings within my own life in terms of how I access higher education influencing how I gain access to. I think what happens a lot is that we often talk about how we gain access to higher education as rural Black students, but how do we continue to matriculate through graduation, right? And so I think what was important was that I brought the both in terms of, because I know a lot of the rural research really it's focused on many parts of like the community of rural communities in terms of how we gain access to higher education, but they focus on it individually. And so what my work really did was really, let's think about it collectively on a collective front. How does my high school support, because a lot of research talks about how the rural high school supported, how families supported, how community members support it all separately. But my work really brought it together. Let's think about how all of these entities together support or increase access to higher education, right? And not only that, but how the students themselves, and this being student driven and community driven, how are they shaping their own access to higher education, right? And so really being intentional, even I think about the prompts that I came up with too, really, again, getting at that critical and that asset base. So really asking the questions of, like, the first prompt really got at like who and what in your community supports your access to higher education. And then the second one really got at what am I resisting and refusing in pursuit of my access to higher education, right? And so them being able to capture through photos how they wanted to answer these prompts, right? And so really being, again, going back to that intentional piece, how am I being truly intentional in the space that I'm creating? How am I being intentional in the way that I show up, and knowing that I am the adult researcher in this space, but also acknowledging that I'm not the only knowledge holder in this space, right? And so I think it really matters when you think back to your original question of how would I describe YPAR, or what is YPAR? Well, what does it really mean to me in some ways, really thinking about the intentionality of it and ensuring that it's very non-extractive and being intentional and genuine in my approach. And I think also having that personal connection to the community was very helpful and supportive in my work as well.
Yeah, so like generally, if you're gonna do a methodology like this, because participatory action research requires that a part of it is like you're not the only researcher in the project. Is that folks, if you use the language of participants, like if whoever your participants are will also serve as like co-researchers, and then together you will co-construct a project that you will complete, execute, analyze, and figure out how you want to disseminate that. And I strongly discourage folks, doc students, from doing participatory action research in grounded theory. It is not because I don't think you shouldn't do it as a doc student. It's because my assumption is that most people don't have enough of a qualitative foundation to execute it in the time frame they want to be done by. Because most of y'all who are listening, you just so busy trying to get done that you don't have the patience or the capacity to do the amount of reading and studying and like designing that it would be required to do a study this way. And I didn't realize how ridiculous it was for me to not only do the whole thing in 2 months, but to do a form of participatory action research, because using sister circle methodology, I didn't design it. I came up with like, I'm curious about Black women's identity development, but as for the nuts and bolts of the study, I did not know that until I knew who the folks were going to be, like the participants in the study the co-researchers, who they were going to be. And we, as the 10 of us, decided these are the directions we're going to go in. This is what we're going to do. And you did like I was working with doc students, you were working with high school students. So, well, I'm sure it was fun and lit. It was probably also chaos in the best way. And I just remember having a lot of conversations in a group about y'all about to just like ride out, like y'all about to take over the school. Y'all came up with some plans. It's just, I love young people. Like I wanted to be a high school teacher, but
I
that's
do
a different thing.
too.
But I love that age because they're ready. They're ready.
Oh, I'm glad you brought this up, because when I tell you they were good and ready, like, my students, like, and I went too bad for my students, Marvette. I went too bad for my students. So, and I know I talked about this in my defense, but I'm gonna say it here again as well, because so when the leadership changed, the principal, I'm not certain on this, but I'm an empath, so I felt the energy like I felt that she was threatened by me in some ways. Like this young Black woman, who are you coming up in my school? And I know this on record, so if she listens to this, thank you.
Hey,
Um,
Tyler.
right,
Okay.
right, right. She needs to listen, right? Um, and so really, like, I remember my students being like, Miss Jenay, like, I don't even think the administrators really are paying attention or really care for, what the work is that we're doing, right? And so I think I'm reminded about this instance when the head principal, I'm walking out of the school, minding my Black business, like you say, drinking my water and minding my business.
Mind my business.
And so, and so the head principal walks up to me, and this is written in the dissertation at this point, so they can read that as well. And so it's on Google Scholar. And so the principal says to me, "Oh, this student, like, did you know that she was getting written up? Did you know she was doing this, that, and the third, da 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 da?" And so, like, super deficit language, right? And so the assistant principal standing next to her, like, co-signing, like, yeah, 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 like. And so to me, I saw that as like, why are you that is why, to get back to the root of it, that's why YPAR is needed, because it's a critical participatory tool that supports access for rural Black students specifically, because that's who I study with and for, right? And so this is why YPAR is needed. In that moment, I was reminded of, Jenay, you can't be all rah, you better get it together. You can be boiling in the inside, and I was boiling in the inside, but I had to keep it together for my students because they're the drivers of the work. Again, like you said, the co-researchers, my co-researchers really kept me together on the days that it was hard, and so I'm reminded is that in co-creating the space that I had with them, it really taught me a lot about myself too, as a scholar, right? And as an individual, not even just as a scholar, but as an individual personally. And I saw so much of myself in them, like in different ways when I was a student. And so I think it's super important in terms of like how are you approaching YPAR and knowing that not everyone is going to be appreciative of it, right? And then also, how are you continuing to be intentional about how you approach this work, right? And I think about what you just said too, is like you gotta be reasonable about the time in which you're able to commit to this. Because again, YPAR is not extractive in any way, and it should not be, because that's not YPAR to me. And so that's why I do view it as hard work. Not hard, HARD. It's hard on some days, but it's worth it, right? It's worth it. You got to have those difficult conversations to keep moving forward. And so in another way, what I thought was super intentional too, is that I reminded my students about, like, yes, we're doing this work together right now. And it's not just going to stay within this room. It's about those that come behind us. So I would often ask them, how is this shaping, how are the conversations we're having in this space that we're sharing being supportive for the rural Black students like us that come behind us? And I think that's super important, because oftentimes, many a times, rural Black students get forgotten. And I think that's why I was called to this work, is because I'm here to say that rural Black students do exist, right? And I'm here to also be mindful of the fact that it takes a community, it takes a village to really support us, a people for us. And they don't always have to look like us, right? And so I say that to say, like, that administrator, she did remind me that combating anti-Black racism is a never-ending race. It's a never-ending race. And so at the same time, being reminded that we do need people that don't look like us to support us, right? And so it was in some ways spirit, like it did like kill my spirit in some ways when she said that to me, but I had to be reminded of what brought me to this work. It's my students that brought me to this work. It's that I'm thinking about the people that come behind me and them also being my students who brought me to this work, but not only just my students, the generations to come, is that real, that's what really matters. It's not just about me, it's about the people that come behind me.
Mm-hmm. I like the point about it's not meant to be extractive. I'm laughing because I just remember in my defense, or even when my committee had any feedback, I was like, I don't, because I remember our chair being like, well, you have to like have some recommendations about like what are we taking from this work and what are we gonna tell people to move forward. And I was like, Christina, I said what I said. Ain't nothing changed. Program's gonna still treat Black women this way. I don't got nothing new for them. I'm not going to pull from these sacred conversations we had to be like, and this is what I'll give you a little 2, 3 bullet points, and it's gonna say the same thing the last study said, right? But most of my my discussion chapter is going to be towards my co-researchers because I don't really care about this, right? Like it's not, I didn't do this for like, oh, I'm gonna go get this, I'm gonna get this job, I'm gonna have this publication. That's not how I started off in this research. That's not how I designed it. And that's not how we ended this, right? Like even when the formalized data collection was over, we kept our sister circles going because it's about having a certain ethic. Like it's like you said, it's heart-centered work. And when you actually give a fuck about people, your research looks different. But it does
Mhm.
require, right, like a foundation of
So nefarious folk, we care about the people. We
we
care
care
about the
about the
people.
people, and we are trained to learn how the system works so that we can work around it to give students what they need, for all students to get what they need,
Right, right.
right? And this is why this is why I still have dissertation coaching, because I want people to understand that there's so much you can do in qualitative research, but most of your programs are trash, number one, and I mean that. I'm not taking it back. But two, the reason why I'm saying it's trash is because they're not teaching you qualitative research. They're teaching you a post-positivist, whitewash, westernized way of doing research and calling it something else, right? And so when you do a design where you are inviting people to work alongside you, that is so radical in so many spaces. And I'm like, we still there? Like
Right. We did.
we
It's 2024.
we
still
still there? We
there.
still
Right.
supposed to go into somebody's culture and study them and then go back and say, well, the savages, like what?
You know, I'm glad you brought this up, Marvette, because that's another piece that my students like were really good at being right, really vocal about. Is like
Mhm.
we don't want to leave it up to anybody else to write our stories for us. We want to be the writers of our own stories. And so that kept reminding me, like, yes, and that's a large reason why I went into this work too. Because in the literature, all I was seeing was deficit language about rural students at large, but specifically that deficit language around rural Black students. And so my students constantly reminded me, like, even like when I had the altercation with the principal, it's like, this is why the work matters. This
Mhm.
is why I must continue. Even though my spirit might be broken right now, I have to continue. And I was reminded that even if I'm not at 100% at my best on days, I still got to show up for my students because this is who the work is for. I'm doing this for them and not for myself. And going back to like what you said about, I didn't go into this thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna get that. I wasn't worried about no awards when I went. That's not what I went into this for. I
Yeah.
went into this to truly be heart driven, community driven into the work. That's how I went into it. It's not all about these accolades and awards, and it's not about that. Are they nice? They're nice, but that's not what I went into it for. That's not what matters at the end of the day. When I close my eyes, what matters is, how are we moving the work forward? How are we moving society forward to support access for rural Black students and communities?
Yeah. And okay, from full circle moment, I was being ridiculous at the beginning of this episode, right? Like, oh, it's a little girl, black girl, right? But like, that's what the world, I'm sure, constantly projects back to you. Like, you're not supposed to be here because of these things. It's like, no, that's why I'm here, because of all of that and more. And that's why I'm about to like just this my language, fuck all this shit up. Like, you don't even know.
I told
Um,
you, you remember, I told you I had that dream
mhm.
about the principles, like it was so what's the word? Symbolic. It was so
Valid,
symbolic.
yeah.
I was ready to burn it all. Like I was like, and I woke up. I remember being in my grandma's home because I dissertated from my grandma. You talking about heart.
Mhm, mhm.
I was in my grandma's home and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like my body was warm because I could just feel the imagery from the dream, like them being dressed in all Black, the fire surrounding me. It was just so much. And I was like, whoo, love. I just felt it. It was a wrap,
Mhm.
like
Yeah,
so that is truly,
yeah,
it's truly the work. You have to do this work from a heart-driven and community-driven place.
yeah.
Intentionality. Back to intentionality. It really does.
I'm gonna ask a deep question.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
Okay. Um, I'm curious, how did high school Jenay, who was watching you like become a whole doctor, defend a whole dissertation? Now, I'm about to cry, but like, what was she saying while watching you work with these high school students, and then like now you're in this big fancy room and everybody's here watching you becoming doctor? Like, what was that like?
Whew. Ah. That is a good question. That's a very heavy question, but in a good way, in a good way. Ooh, because I thought about this too, even when I was like crafting the email to the principal, I was like, ooh. I remember talking to my Black Educational Thought fam about this, about going back home. And I think I said to them, I said, the administrators who are there now in this new leadership, they might be used to, oh, because Jenay was an A student or A and B student, she can't. And then, like I come from rural town. So to provide some context, my daddy knew everybody. He's funeral home mortician, he got rental property. So he what my daddy jokingly say, I house them while they living and I help them transcend when they go to heaven. And so like people really knew my dad too. And they knew my brother. And so they would sometimes call me Little Willis. And so we were known as respectable children growing up in high school and K through 12, honestly. And so I remember telling my Black Educational Thought fam that I'm not that same Jenay. I did what I needed to do because my parents wanted me to do well in my class and everything. But I'm somebody that talk my shit now. I did what I needed to do then, but now I talk my shit, and you're gonna hear me talk my shit. And so I think that also reminds me or affirms why in some ways the principal wasn't receptive of me or receptive of me, my students as well in our research, right? And so really being understanding of that, the Jenay that you had in ninth grade through 12th grade is not the same Jenay you receiving as a full grown adult, And being reminded, I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, this ain't for y'all. This is for my students and my co-researchers to move their lives to help shape their own lives experiences and to help them be the pillars in their own community and shaping their access to higher education. So yeah.
I just want you to know, and I recognize that this can come with a lot of pressure, and that's not my intention, even though I know, like, definitely that's the reality of it sometimes. I hope that young Janae knows, like, you are already a force. Like, you were already disrupting shit, walking into rooms, and now this is just this is just a different level of it. And so I'm sure that even now you're still the youngest one in the room, probably, and people are like, "What?" You still are disrupting spaces, and you will continue to disrupt spaces, and you'll continue to make impact with your work. And this is absolutely just the beginning, right? Because it was just a dissertation, and I'm not saying just like it wasn't anything, but like you are just getting
Let's get started.
started, and I am so excited to watch what happens next, and I am excited that I got to be a really small part of this journey and watching you bring all of this together. And it is not lost on me because it's not easy to bring.
But don't minimize yourself. You played a huge part in my getting to the finish line, child.
If you see my head and my vision, I'm like, wait, you're gonna become as a small, and I
Girl,
don't
I'm
mean that
telling you,
like
you
I
got
didn't
me.
help, but I mean like the impact you're going to have. But I appreciate you and that accountability, real talk. And I want to say, like, it's not easy to bring different scenarios to the group, right? Like, you could have been like, no, I'm gonna just talk to you privately. I don't want to
Yeah.
talk in front of everyone, but you didn't, and
And you helped me
like,
break out of my shell because
yeah.
Georgia College, and they was like, I was very to myself.
Listen, y'all, by the end of it, they would come off mute like, now wait a minute, what we not doing is what you're doing over there. You're not gonna talk about yourself like that. I was like, yeah,
Right.
I just pay bills here. I don't even work here. Like, but it was just so beautiful to watch that transition of you like playing the background in the group and then being one of like the most vocal, like collecting the people. And so I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for providing me the space to show up. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
It's all in how you create the space itself, which goes back to the common thread throughout our conversation. How are we as people
Yeah.
creating space? Yeah. And being intentional.
And being intentional. This is why the world needs student affairs professionals.
Yes,
What advice would you give to someone who's like, I don't know. I keep seeing her talk about this whole group situation. The name keeps changing, but I am taking it back to finish your dissertation because that was a clear name. But for someone who's maybe on the fence, they want to join, but they don't know, any words of encouragement or advice?
Yes, I'm glad. Yes, I love this question. So I would definitely say it is definitely worth joining because of you, Dr. Marvette Lacy, and also because of the community. But I really think it has a large part of like I remember the first conversation we had. You didn't care about like how's doc life going, Jenay? how are you doing? So
Mm,
that care, that compassion that
yeah.
you really bring to the group and that you cultivate for the group is really, really why I would suggest or encourage people to join.
That's the biggest compliment ever. Yes.
Yes. No, it's coming from the heart, straight from the heart.
Mm-hmm. I tell people all I ever wanted to do was be a teacher. And I
You are
kept
teaching though.
Oh, absolutely. Because I tried through K to 12 and I was like, oh, this is a standardized test. We're not teaching, got it. And then I tried right student affairs. And what I realized is that I wanted to be a teacher, but I wanted to be a teacher who focused more on the whole person. Like that wasn't just like buzzwords to me. Like I felt that of like I want to talk to the whole person and teach the whole person, not just trying to get a certain grade or a score. And so I get to do that every day and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that people trust me. And yeah, I deeply, deeply care about people. So,
You're leaning into your calling,
because I tried to quit a lot of times, y'all.
but you kept going.
I tried to quit.
But
Uh,
it's like you said, I'll never forget this. So you said this in one of our calls is about like sometimes like when we feel like we our worlds might be shattered, or even if we feel like we're failing, it's about failing forward, right? You
mhm,
fail
mhm.
forward. You don't fail and you don't become like you don't become the failure because you're not
Yeah,
a failure, right? But it's about failing forward and to keep going. Keep you get up and you keep going. You don't stay complacent where you are because that's not how the work get done. So you
yeah.
just going and you fail forward. So I'll never forget that you shared those wise words with me.
Fail forward. Yeah, because we gonna keep failing. That's what life is made of. But you don't have to, I love how you put that. You don't have to become the failure because you're not a failure.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any final words that you want to share, and how do people follow up with you if they want to know more?
Yes. So final words. I love this conversation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for again. I really, really thank you for creating this space for FYD. Thank you. And thank you. I got a shout out again to the Dr. Barbette. Shout out to the Dr. Academics as
Yeah.
well. And so I really, really thank you. And follow me. I am not in these Twitter streets, but I am, but I'm old school, so I do have a Facebook,
I'm
and
on
I'm
Facebook.
it
Listen, Facebook is making a comeback, y'all. If you want to make some side money, you should definitely get on Facebook.
is. People from my hometown got blue check marks. I'm like, what?
That's what I'm saying. They got a budget and they like, we ready to spend.
I'm telling you. I really love this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I did too. Thank you.